So what do you get when you mix a former radio DJ, a pastor, a professor, and a best-selling author? You get Steve Brown.
When I went to college, I was a college agnostic. I couldn't shake this thing about being called to be a pastor, but it would be like me selling hair restorer.
This is Contagious Influencers of America. I'm David Sands. Today we're joined by a truly remarkable guest, one with an iconic voice, and I'm talking about Steve Brown. Steve's journey has taken him from the world of commercial radio to the pulpit, from newsrooms to classrooms, and from local churches to a national platform. He's the founder of Key Life Network and hosts Key Life, heard on some 600 radio stations across this great nation. He's the familiar voice behind Key Life's You Think About That features on Keep the Faith Radio. Now, as a pastor, professor, author of more than 15 books, and a beloved teacher of grace, Steve has spent his life helping people experience the radical freedom of the gospel. And of course, we have to mention that he and his wife are the proud parents of 2 daughters and 3 grandbabies. Now, his story is one of faith, resilience, and the life-changing power of God's love. You can learn more about Steve at youthinkaboutthat.org, where he has a free ebook for you right now to download. And again, that's youthinkaboutthat.org. We'll repeat that at the end of all this. Now, here's a really, truly honest and inspiring conversation with my friend, Steve Brown.
Steve, they say that we're finally on.
It takes a while.
All these modern technology breakthroughs.
It'll get you every time.
You've seen a lot of them over the years, haven't you?
Yeah, boy, have I.
Hey, when you first got into radio, gosh, I mean, you've been doing this a long time.
Oh, I really
and you've
have.
learned so much.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, when you first got into radio, and radio was king.
It was.
And TV, what there were, like when I got into TV, there were 3 TV networks and 1 PBS station. That was about it.
Things have really changed.
Yeah, we've both seen so much change over the years, but just tell me from a ministry standpoint, over those years with all of this technology change, what has been consistent?
Jesus. I don't want to sound too religious, but he's the same yesterday and today and forever. So that hasn't changed, and that's been kind of an anchor you lean on when you're as old as I am. And I started in commercial radio. They paid a lot better than Christian radio did, and I loved it, and then Jesus came and messed it up. But it was but it was different, but Jesus has remained the same over all these years. And I suspect I can trust that will be true for eternity.
When did you first fall in love with the message? When did you first understand and realize, come to know that Jesus was truly the answer?
Well, it happened 2,000 years ago, and I caught up with it when I was 16, and Mr. Graham was having it wasn't a crusade, he was preaching. I grew up in the mountains of North Carolina, and Montreat was near my home, and Mr. Graham, and I'm going there next week. I'm going to be teaching at the Billy Graham Training Center. Anyway, Mr. Graham was preaching that evening, and if I had to hang a date on it, that would be the time. David, it's kind of interesting that after I was 16, I went south fast. When I went to college, I was a college agnostic. I couldn't shake this thing about being called to be a pastor, but it would be like me selling hair restore, given that I didn't believe or wasn't sure that there was a God. It'd be really dumb to be a pastor. So I went to a graduate school of theology where they didn't believe anything either, and I thought it would be a good match. And then God, somebody has said to say, I think it was Lewis, that said to say I was searching for God was like saying a mouse is searching for a cat. And a number of things happened. I thought I was an intellectual in those days, and I met some brothers who really were intellectuals, and they did it with gentleness and kindness, but they ate my lunch. And then, in the middle of all this, we had a little girl that was born very sick. She had a blood count that was rising rapidly, a modeling leg that wasn't getting any nourishment. And the doctor said to me, Mr. Brown, if you know how to pray, this would be a good time. David, I didn't know how to pray, but a couple of weeks before that, met some charismatic. So a group of charismatics at Rock Harbor Manor on Cape Cod. And they were the only people I knew who knew God enough to be in touch with him. So I went to them. They said, isn't it great you have a new little girl? And I started crying. Now, I'm not a charismatic, but I don't make fun of them in thunderstorms either. Well, at any rate, they joined hands and they prayed. And my wife, who was still in the hospital, called the next morning and she said, honey, did anybody pray last night? And I said, yeah. And she said, well, the doctor came in and they were going to take her to Children's Hospital in Boston for the blood transfusion, which, in those days, kids died of it. And she said the doctor came in. The specialist says he's no longer worried about the leg, and the blood count is normal, and I don't understand it. Well, I didn't understand it either. In those days, I was liberal, just this side of wacko, if anything. And that kind of thing, when God intervenes in your life that way, can play havoc with your mind. And it did with mine. And that was the beginning of a multi-year growth period in my life. I was a pastor of a church in Boston. And I remember kneeling down and saying, God, I'm not good, but all I've got is yours. And I don't have any authority. So I'm just going to decide by faith that your word will be my authority. I didn't even know what it said, David. I remember getting in the pulpit and staying one verse ahead of that congregation, and we had an explosion. I mean, the church went into a growth mode. Kids started coming from Harvard and MIT and Wellesley. They packed the church out. We didn't give a dime to missions, and we decided to have a missions conference. Didn't even know what that was. And missions, we developed a large budget, and then it doubled, and then it quadrupled. It was, and I think what God was doing is that he was hammering in to make sure I got it, because I've never seen that kind of power in my ministry. And I didn't know anything. It wasn't me. I mean, it was totally him. I'd like to say I was so smart. And I do have a wonderful voice. It's better than yours, David. And I'd like to say That was the reason, but it wasn't. It was God, and I remember all kinds of stories come. I called a missionary in Korea, and I said to him, his name was Moffat. He was one of the early pioneers of Korean missions, and I said, Dr. Moffat, somebody told me that you love Jesus and believe the Bible, and if you really do, I'll send you some money. And if you'll give me a list of other people who love Jesus and believe the Bible, I'll send them money too. And we had him at that first missions conference, and he said he never received a call like that in his entire life. And
Wow.
And then the Jesus movement happened, and those were exciting years. Kids started coming off drugs into our church and revolutionized the church. We were an old, staid Presbyterian church right down the street from Adam's birthplace. And we got shook up. These kids had a Jesus march around the church, and I thought it was Jericho, and they were going to blow the trumpets, and the whole thing was going to come down. But those were exciting, and everybody knew, liberals and conservatives and people that were sort of Christians and people that weren't and people that really believed and had been praying, we agreed that something amazing and wonderful was happening, and it did. And so now, David, you can see how I became the spiritual giant that is talking to you today.
And we're seeing some of that happen again on college campuses across the country.
I think we're sitting on top of an awakening, and there are we have 4,000 pastors on our mailing list, and so I spend a lot of time talking to and listening to and crying with pastors. And there's this sense all over the country that Aslan is on the move, that an awakening is close. And you're right, some things that are happening on college campuses are unbelievable. So I'm kind of positive.
Yeah, I am too. I think that there's definitely an appetite. I know my nephews are into a lot of college ministries, and one of them in particular is doing some amazing things at Ohio State. Of course, I'm going to say that because I'm a Buckeye, so I had to get that in there.
Listen, as long as you don't love Ohio State more than you love Jesus, you're all right.
They're kind of close.
Up and down.
Yeah, you sound like. Don't ask me that question on a Saturday between noon and 3. I just got to ask you. You have this just this undeniable. I mean, you're one of the I think premier storytellers. And we all love stories. We love stories growing up. My mom would tell me stories when I was little. That's one thing I think comes with for those that are fortunate to have a mom and a dad is storytelling when you're young. But and I know you grew up in an interesting household.
I did.
Which we can talk about. But I really want to know where and how in the world God gave you this incredible gift for storytelling.
I'm a communicator, and when you said people love to hear stories, that was not a surprise to me. I have a friend, Richard Pratt, who wrote a book a number of years ago, and the name of the book was He Gave Us Stories. And so I got this from Jesus. It's not anything new. And I saw the difference in people when I was talking about doctrine and was defending the Christian faith against the Graf Wellhausen documentary hypothesis. They were sleeping and shaking their watches. But when I told stories, they listened. And so I'm a communicator. I don't want to talk and have nobody listen. In fact, David, I wrote a book called How to Talk So People Will Listen. And so I wanted people to listen. I have a good message. And I found out that if you don't tell stories, they go to sleep. And so that's where that came from. It's not that I'm a natural storyteller. It's just I'm a communicator. I used to sell beer and cigarettes when I was in commercial radio, and now the product is so much better. But I know what causes people to listen, and stories will do that. And Jesus knew that too.
He sure did. And let's talk about that just a minute, because I want to learn from you. Okay, some of this is a little, I guess. I want to take this time. Let's have a little bit of one-on-one mentorship here. Okay, let's talk about the art of telling a story. What are the ingredients that you look for, and what are the what are the things that you absolutely find most engaging in storytelling?
Well, I think it moves human hearts, and that's what's engaging. And you got to find stories. They're everywhere. You're a story, David, and I'm a story. And everything we encounter has a story attached to it. And if it moves your heart, and if it causes you to think, and if you're drawn to it, then use it in your speeches and your sermons. If it's dull and you don't like it and it doesn't move you, junk it. And you begin to have this filter when you're sensitive to it. And you listen to people's stories and you read about people's stories. Now, that's not the only thing I do. I'm a teacher. So if my wife is a musician, classical musician, and she says that music is the universal language. And there's a sense in which it's true, but if you don't put some words with it, it doesn't communicate anything except notes. So it's the same with stories. Stories need to have the pedagogical side, which is the teaching side, to make them powerful enough to change lives. And so I found out that stories were important, but explaining the stories and pointing them out and referencing God in those stories, that can be powerful stuff.
Yeah, and I think that the one thing that I would like to also weigh in on that is from the standpoint that so many of us, so many folks don't want to tell their story. They want to hide their story. They don't understand that their story can help so many others if they're just willing to tell it. And I know that you know that's true. So for somebody listening right now who feels like their story is not good enough, or their story is just too much for others to handle, or they're ashamed of their story, what would you say to them?
I'd say that's not true. But you got to test it. I understand fear. I'm afraid of everything. So that's a big risk, to take the mask off and to begin to talk about the reality that you've encountered. So find somebody who loves you and tell that person the story and see their reaction. And then test it in other places. You don't have to jump into the deep end of the pool right away. If you've never gone swimming, you'll die. So wade in, go in carefully. There's a book, and it's an old book, and the guy who wrote it's not a Christian, but it's called The Transparent Self. I was trying to think of his name, and it'll come to me as soon as we finish talking. But he said if you're going to have friendships, you trade off pieces of your soul. I tell you a little bit about me, and if you don't stomp it to death, you'll tell me a little bit about you, and we'll be closer. And in the process, after we trade, it gets bigger and more clear and more honest. And pretty soon you'll have a friend for life. And so stories are like that too. You need to test it out to see how it goes, to find out whether you tell a good story. And it develops over time.
You know, I love what you do on our radio show with your segments. So you think about that, and I know you've done these for a long time. And how many of those segments, those stories, are you up to now?
Yeah.
How many thousands?
No, they're not thousands. I think they're hundreds, maybe 200 or 300, 400. I don't know. You know John Frost, and John has pretty much I used to do them, and they had a political twist to them, or a theological or metaphysical twist to them, and nobody listened to them. And so John became kind of my mentor in doing those you think about that things. He said, Steve, you got to sound old, and you got to sound like you're everybody's grandfather. You sound like a mean right-wing preacher, so quit it. And he stayed. I one time walked out of the studio. I got so angry at him. And he said to our producer, Eric, I think this is over. I think I've offended Steve. And he said, no, you haven't. He'll go back to his study and smoke his pipe. And in 2 minutes, he'll be back in here and ask your forgiveness. And that's what happened. And John oversaw those, and those have been really used in an amazing way. And they're mostly stories.
Yeah, John's a great talent. We've been friends for, 25 years or 30 years or so, and worked together a lot, including on Keep the Faith. And what a talent he is. But I have to tell you that, first of all, I remember you back when you were, we both worked with Bud Patson.
Oh, yeah.
For a while. Yeah, the Great Lake Bud.
So did John.
And I love the show that you had on when we were working with worship. I love the show that you had on the weekends.
You know what brought that to an end? I had 2 lesbians on. And I made very clear, our producer she went through an awful time to get them to go on because they had been attacked by Christians. And our producer, who now is married and has 3 kids, but she was in her 20s and single and just a delight. She said to this lesbian pastor, Steve won't attack you. You'll have a good time. He won't agree with you, but you'll have a good time. And so she finally came on, and she looked like the grandmother in a television show. And I said several times during the program, I profoundly disagree with that, but I like you. And we started getting letters. I got a letter and we got them from all over the country. And I got a letter from one woman that said, take me off your mailing list, but you don't care. You got two new friends. And then the second wave of letters was positive. I got a letter from a lady in California that said, my husband is an atheist and not a believer. And he sat there and watched that whole program. And Steve, I want you to know that if he becomes a Christian, it will be because of that program. And I got a letter from a seminary professor, and he said, I've never been so proud of a brother in my lifetime. So that was a fun television program, but that was pretty much brought it to an end. And it was clear. I mean, I was not in any way advocating a lifestyle that was not biblical. In fact, at the end of the program, this lesbian pastor said, "You know, Steve, you may be right." And which was amazing, really amazing. And I didn't keep up with her, but I wish I had.
So what was the show? Was it on the lifestyle itself, on the gay lesbian life, or what was the controversy specifically?
Because I said at the opening, we're going to talk to two ladies with whom I disagree profoundly. And I said, but we're going to listen, because we Christians don't listen very often, and we mostly talk, and we might learn something. We don't know. And I will make sure during the program to let you know that I'm not buying into all of this. But let's listen tonight. That program was called The Late Steve Brown. It was on a weekend, Sunday nights, I think. And a lot of people thought I died, and some were glad. But it was a fun program. And Bud Paxson was no longer involved in it. I think he would have understood.
Yeah. For those of you who are not aware, Bud was the co-founder of Home Shopping Network and of Pax TV, a family-friendly television service in the late 90s, early 2000s. And there was also an overnight component to that called the Worship Network, which basically 90% of the time we ran Bible verses over nature scenes with hymns, which was broadcast throughout all of America. And Steve had a show on that. So I should probably have set that up a little bit better, but I was a fan of yours watching that show, and I thought you were great. I thought, man, why isn't this show on someplace else now that it's not on PAX? Because I thought you did a heck of a job. But you bring up a point, and that is Christians don't listen very well. We're dealing with a situation right here at the studio today where we got a phone call and an email from two affiliates who are concerned about a particular artist, a legacy artist that we all love, who has, over a period of time, there's an issue regarding let's just say the gay community, and they're like, well, we want to know whenever this artist is on the air because we want to pull her off in regards to her Christmas memories or her song. And I'm like, really? Seriously? I mean, Steve, we're still dealing with this.
I know. We always are critical, and we should be, of a canceled culture. But we've had ours too. And sometimes it's been harsh and hurtful and wrong. Everybody who belongs to Jesus belongs to everybody who belongs to Jesus. And Jesus said that if we want to see awakening and revival, the way we do it is loving each other. That brings awakening. And yet, if you don't hold the same eschatological views that I do, I say I'm not going to have anything to do with you. Or if you do things that offend me, that I don't think you ought to do as a Christian, and I have nothing. Every time we do things like that, we hold back the power that God would give us. And so, and I didn't make that up. That's what Jesus said. They'll know that you're Christians by your love. And when he prayed for us, he prayed that we would be one. And when you read about Jesus, he had some weird people around him. I wouldn't want them in my church. But he really did. And That's part of the power of the incarnation, is that he hung out with wine bibbers and sinners, and he was crucified for it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you certainly have seen so much over the years, and you're such a gift to us all. I mean, I have to tell you, I've read a couple of your books, and how many? What are you up to? 25, 30, 40 books? I mean,
13, maybe 50, I don't know, but not that many. And David, I need permission from you to call you at least once every 3 weeks and say, you remember what you said in that interview to me and how wonderful I was? Would you repeat that to me?
you can just watch the podcast over and over again. How's that? But I'm happy to talk. I'm happy to talk to you anytime. I want to ask you, for pastors coming up, young pastors coming up, let's help them out a little bit. If there's one thing that you could do over again as a pastor, right? What would it be that would help them out?
I started to say, not be a pastor. That's what I would have done. Sometimes I said to Jesus, I wouldn't do this for anybody but you. There is one of the things that is almost profound is that, and it has to do with what we were just talking about. There's a 10-90 principle. 10% of Christians are mean-spirited. They don't like anybody. They're irritated all the time. 90% of the Christians that I know are wonderful. They're kind and merciful and compassionate. They've been loved by Jesus, and they love others because of it. And I tell young students, and I've taught a lot for 100 years in the seminary, if you cater to that 10%, you'll get regular raises, and you'll never lose your job. If you cater to the 90%, you're going to go through an awful time. And if you survive it, you're going to have an incredible church. But you got to be brave if you're going to cater to the 90%, because the 10% are mean as snakes, and generally they have power. And then I would teach students how to win battles without losing their salvation. Well, I taught some other things too. That wasn't all I taught. I taught homiletics and courses on grace.
Yeah, let's talk about grace a minute, because you're definitely you're full of grace, and you are just. I know you were going to say that you were full of something else, but no, you're full of grace.
David, I'm not sure you're saved.
You won't be the first one to say that. I think our friend John Frost has said that a couple of times. No,
Me too.
but what is it about grace that helps you just look over your life and you go, wow, God really has cared. He really has loved me. He really has his hand on me. I can tell.
You know something, David, and this is going to sound radical, but it's biblical. Our sin, when we know it, is a major gift that God has given us. And our obedience, when you know it, is our most dangerous place. And so God, in his graciousness, has allowed me to see myself as I really am. My late friend Jack Miller, who taught at Westminster Seminary, where I sometimes teach, Jack said the whole Christian faith can be summed up in 2 sentences. First, cheer up, you're a lot worse than you think you are. And 2, cheer up, God's grace is a lot bigger than you think it is. And I think he was right. And so God, in his kindness, has allowed me to see, and I'm not proud of it, my selfishness, my ego, the way I've hurt people, things that I've done that I'm ashamed of. And then, so I got the point, he hugged me. And when he did that, I realized this is what the faith is all about. It's about God's grace and mercy and kindness, his love. And he loved us before we loved him. And it's what the Christian faith is about. You don't become a wuss about it or a weenie. I mean, it's not what the world needs now is love, sweet love. That's nonsense. What the world needs now is somebody who's got the power, who forgives us, who'll stand with us, who'll back us up, and who will get us home safely before the dark.
Wow. Well, that's a great way to end this. And I want to tell you that I can't. Are you still? By the way, do you still smoke a pipe?
I do. And once I turned 50, I quit trying to hide it.
Well, I started smoking cigars. Let me see. 1991. I went to I went to the company that I was with at the time. The chief operating officer was marrying the daughter of the coach of the New York Mets. So this was a big wedding in New York. It was at some club someplace. And back in 91, of course, you could still smoke indoors.
Yeah.
But my buddy put me at a table with there was a table of 10, and there were 10 guys. 9 of them were New York Mets and me. And they started, there was a box of Cohiba cigars in the middle of the table, and they started pulling out smoking. They go, and by that time we were good friends, of course. And they said, David, you're going to have one with us, aren't you? So the New York Mets taught me how to smoke a cigar.
You know, David, we're going to have to edit this anyway. But let me tell you a story. I was speaking at a large evangelical solid church, and I used smoking a pipe as an illustration of heaven. I said, you know, I smoke a pipe, and don't send me letters because people more spiritual than you are have tried to get me to stop. But if I'm in a dull faculty meeting, I think if I can get through this, I can go smoke my pipe. And if I'm in church and the sermon is horrible, I think this is terrible. But if I can just sit here and stay awake, when it's over, I can go get a smoke. And I used a lot of illustrations. Well, I got letters you wouldn't believe. Let me tell you what happened. The next time I was at that church, guys, and standing at the door, they had 7 services, identical. They filled my pockets with cigars. I mean, every pocket I had a handful of cigars. I gave them to all my friends because I don't smoke cigars. And they started, and it's still going, this has been years ago, a Bible study group called Holy Smoke. Where guys,
we have one here in Nashville, too. That's great. Well, Steve, thank you so much, my friend.
David, I've loved this. Thank you for it.
Absolutely. We'll do it again. Let's do it again. This has been fun.
It has.
This has been fun.
It has. Bless you, brother.
Thanks again, Steve. If you want to dive deeper into Steve's work, head on over to youthinkaboutthat.org. That's youthinkaboutthat.org, where you'll find his books, broadcasts, resources for living in the freedom of God's grace. And don't forget to download that free ebook right now at youthinkaboutthat.org. Steve has it right there waiting for you right now at youthinkaboutthat.org. Why don't I say that one more time? youthinkaboutthat.org. And of course, you can check out our big website at KeepTheFaith.com, where you're going to find all kinds of goodies. We're putting new content in there for you all the time at KeepTheFaith.com. Hey, do me a favor this week, and that's go out there and live that life in living color, because it sure is a heck of a lot more interesting than living it in black and white. Until next time, I'm David Sams.